The night Duke Cassian Viral chose her from across that ballroom, Lyra Halden thought her life was finally beginning. She was wrong. What started as a Cinderella story turned into the most brutal lesson she'd ever learn. Some men don't choose you to keep you, they choose you to use you. And when the world's most powerful duke publicly discarded her like yesterday's news, everyone expected her to crumble. Instead, she did something nobody saw coming. This is the story of the girl no one wanted, who became the woman no one could break. Stay until the end to see how this unfolds. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The chandeliers at the Ashford estate burned so bright they hurt to look at directly. Lyra had learned that years ago, learned to keep her eyes down, her posture small, her presence forgettable. In a world where being noticed meant being judged, invisibility had become her armor. She stood against the silk-papered wall, champagne flute untouched in her hand, watching the annual Midwinter Ball unfold like a stage production she'd never been cast in. The orchestra played, the beautiful people danced, and Lyra Halden, as always, observed from the margins. "You're slouching again." Her mother's voice cut through the music like a knife through butter. Eleanor Halden materialized beside her, all sharp angles in an emerald gown that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. Her eyes, the same pale gray as Lyra's, though somehow colder, swept over her younger daughter with practiced disappointment. "I'm not slouching," Lyra said quietly. "I'm standing." "Barely!" Eleanor's fingers found Lyra's shoulder blade and pressed, forcing her spine straighter. "Regina's been on the floor 3 times already. The Thornwell boy can barely take his eyes off her." Of course he couldn't. Regina Halden was everything their mother had engineered her to be. Blonde, where Lyra was dark. Vivacious, where Lyra was quiet. Desired, where Lyra was dismissed. 3 years older and a lifetime ahead in every way that mattered to Eleanor. "That's nice," Lyra managed. "Nice." Her mother's laugh was soft and cutting. "Yes, I suppose it is nice that at least one of my daughters knows how to attract worthwhile attention." She paused, letting the words land. "Though I suppose we can't all be blessed with the same gifts." Lyra's fingers tightened around the champagne flute. The crystal was so delicate she could feel it flex under the pressure. It would be satisfying, she thought distantly, to squeeze just a little harder, to watch it shatter, to make a scene so spectacular they'd have no choice but to notice her. But she wouldn't. She never did. "The Kensington girl is here," Eleanor continued, her voice dropping to the tone she used when delivering particularly sharp observations. "The one who was caught with Lord Ashford's son in the library last season. Somehow she's managed to secure an engagement to a viscount. Amazing what shamelessness can accomplish when breeding fails." The implication hung in the air between them. Even scandal was preferable to whatever Lyra was. "I'm going to get some air," Lyra said. "Don't disappear too long. People will think you've given up entirely." Eleanor smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her gown. "Though I suppose most already have." Lyra didn't respond. She'd learned years ago that her mother's cruelty didn't require an audience, only a target. She set her champagne on a passing servant's tray and made her way toward the terrace doors, keeping to the edges of the ballroom where the shadows were deepest. She'd almost made it when Regina appeared, flushed and laughing, the Thornwell boy trailing behind her like an eager puppy. "Lyra!" Her sister's voice was bright, genuinely pleased. That was the worst part about Regina. She wasn't cruel. She was kind, which somehow made everything harder. "Come dance with us. James says his brother is here somewhere, and he's perfectly nice, and—" "I'm fine, Reg." Lyra forced a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "You look beautiful. Have fun." Something flickered in Regina's eyes. Concern, maybe, or pity. Lyra couldn't tell which. Didn't want to know. "Are you sure?" "Because—" "She's sure," James Thornwell interrupted, his tone friendly but dismissive, the way men spoke when they'd already categorized you as irrelevant. "Not everyone's built for dancing. Some prefer to observe." Regina's expression shifted, a small frown creasing her perfect forehead. "James, that's not—" But Lyra was already moving, pushing through the terrace doors into the biting winter air. Better the cold than that particular flavor of humiliation. At least the cold was honest about what it was. The terrace was empty, thank God. She gripped the stone balustrade and breathed, watching her breath fog in the lamplight. Inside, the music swelled. Someone laughed, high and clear and utterly confident. The sound of people who belonged. Lyra had spent 22 years trying to figure out the trick of it, how her sister could walk into a room and light it up, how her mother could slice through conversations like a blade through silk, how everyone else seemed to know the steps to a dance Lyra had never been taught. She'd tried in the beginning, tried smiling brighter, speaking cleverer, wearing prettier dresses. But there was something about desperation people could smell. The harder she tried, the more they pulled away. Until she learned to stop trying, to accept her role as the shadow to Regina's light. The Halden disappointment, she'd overheard someone call her once, at a garden party 3 summers ago. Pretty enough, I suppose, but there's nothing there, like a painting that's been watered down too many times. The words shouldn't have stuck. She'd heard worse from her own mother, but they had, because they were true. You'll catch your death out here. The voice came from behind her, male, deep, and completely unfamiliar. Lyra spun around. The man leaning against the doorframe was tall, dark-haired, and watching her with an expression that might have been amusement. He was dressed entirely in black, his jacket cut in a style that screamed money and power in equal measure. Even in the dim light from the ballroom, she could see the sharp planes of his face, the way he held himself with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never questioned his right to occupy space. "I'm fine," Lyra said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just needed air." He pushed off the doorframe and stepped onto the terrace. Not approaching, exactly, just claiming the space with the casual confidence of someone used to having the world rearrange itself around him. "Funny, you don't look fine." The presumption of it sparked something hot in Lyra's chest. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I know that look." "What look?" "The one that says you're trying very hard to convince yourself you don't care what's happening in there." He nodded toward the ballroom, while simultaneously caring quite a lot. Lyra's jaw tightened. "That's remarkably presumptuous." "Probably." He moved closer, and she caught the scent of something expensive, cedar and smoke. "I'm Cassian, by the way, since you asked." "I didn't ask." "You were thinking about it." The corner of his mouth lifted. "And you are?" She should walk away. This was clearly someone who found his own cleverness fascinating, and Lyra had long since lost patience for men who thought wit was a substitute for decency. But something in his eyes stopped her. Not kindness, exactly. More like recognition. "Lyra," she said finally. "Halden." His expression shifted, just barely, but enough that she noticed. "Ah, the younger sister." Of course he knew Regina. Everyone knew Regina. "That's me," Lyra said, keeping her voice flat. "The footnote." She expected him to laugh or make some polite denial, or worse, agree with practiced sympathy. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her want to step back. "You don't strike me as a footnote," he said. "Then you're not paying attention." "On the contrary." He moved to the balustrade beside her, close enough that she could see the way the lamplight caught in his dark eyes. "I've been paying quite a lot of attention, which is why I came out here." Lyra's pulse kicked up. This felt like a game she didn't know the rules to. "I don't understand." "No," Cassian said softly. "You wouldn't." Before she could respond, the terrace doors burst open and a group of laughing guests spilled out, champagne and gossip flowing in equal measure. Cassian straightened, his posture shifting into something more formal, more distant. "Come inside," he said. Not a suggestion. "Dance with me." Lyra stared at him. "What?" "You heard me." "I don't—" She shook her head. "I don't even know who you are." Something dangerous flickered across his face. "Yes, you do." And suddenly, she did. The pieces clicked together, the expensive clothes, the commanding presence, the way he spoke with absolute certainty that people would listen. The guest of honor everyone had been whispering about since the invitations went out. "You're Duke Virel," she said. "Cassian," he corrected, "and you're coming inside, now." It wasn't a request, but it also wasn't cruel, just certain, like he'd already decided what happened next and was waiting for her to catch up. "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Cassian's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Because everyone in that ballroom thinks they know exactly who you are, and I'm curious to see what happens when we prove them wrong." He extended his hand. Lyra looked at it. strong, scarred along the knuckles, completely steady, and felt something shift in her chest. This was a terrible idea. He was Duke Cassian Viral, one of the most powerful men in the country, feared and respected in equal measure. She was nobody. The girl people looked through, not at. But his hand was still extended, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone was offering her a choice that wasn't about survival or silence. She took his hand. The ballroom fell silent the moment they entered. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had cut the strings on a marionette show. The music faltered, conversations died. Every head in the room turned toward the terrace doors where Duke Cassian Viral stood with Lyra Halden's hand in his. Lyra's first instinct was to let go, to run, to disappear back into the blessed anonymity she'd spent years cultivating. But Cassian's grip was firm, not painful, but unyielding. "Breathe," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "And keep your chin up. Let them look." He led her onto the dance floor. The crowd parted like water around a stone. Lyra could feel every eye on her, shocked, curious, judging. She caught a glimpse of her mother's face, white with what might have been anger or disbelief. Regina looked delighted and confused in equal measure. And then the music started again, and Cassian's hand settled at her waist, and they were dancing. "Everyone's staring," Lyra said, her voice tight. "Good." Cassian guided her through a turn with practiced ease. "That's the point." "What point? I don't understand what's happening." "You will." He spun her, and she caught her reflection in one of the massive mirrors lining the ballroom. Dark hair, plain dress, completely unremarkable except for the fact that she was in the arms of the most powerful man in the room. "Tell me, Lyra Halden, what do you want?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "It's not complicated. What do you want?" She stumbled slightly, and his hand tightened, keeping her steady. "I don't know. That's not a question people ask me." "I'm asking." They turned again, and she could see people whispering behind gloved hands. Lady Ashford looked like she might faint. James Thornwell had actually stopped dancing to stare. "I want to matter," Lyra heard herself say. The truth of it surprised her. "I want people to see me and think I'm worth something, instead of always being the one who doesn't measure up." Cassian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Interesting. Why are you doing this?" She was getting bolder now, the shock wearing off. "You don't know me. You have no reason to—" "To what? Choose you?" His smile was cold. "Maybe I have very good reasons. Maybe you're exactly what I've been looking for." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "but it's all you're getting tonight." The song ended. Cassian stepped back, released her hand, and bowed, a formal gesture that somehow felt mocking and genuine at once. The ballroom erupted into applause that felt more like a question than a celebration. "Your mother's coming," Cassian said, his voice low. "Probably to interrogate you. Don't give her anything. Just smile and look mysterious." "I don't know how to look mysterious." "Then practice." He straightened, his public face sliding into place, cold, remote, untouchable. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the room. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Halden. Most enlightening." And then he was gone, cutting through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd never had to ask permission for anything. Lyra stood alone in the center of the dance floor, heart pounding, skin flushed, utterly exposed. Eleanor materialized at her elbow. "What just happened?" "I don't know," Lyra said honestly. "What did he say to you?" "Not much." "Lyra!" Her mother's fingers dug into her arm. "That was Duke Viral. Do you have any idea—" She stopped, visibly composing herself. "What did you do?" The accusation stung, but before Lyra could respond, Regina appeared, practically vibrating with excitement. "That was incredible." She grabbed Lyra's other arm. "He never dances with anyone, ever, and he chose you. How did you—" "I didn't do anything," Lyra interrupted. "He just asked." Eleanor and Regina exchanged a look Lyra couldn't quite read. "Well," Eleanor said finally, her tone calculating, "he clearly saw something. We need to figure out what and make sure he sees it again." For the first time in her life, Lyra heard ambition in her mother's voice when she spoke about her. Not disappointment, not resignation, ambition. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like stepping into a trap she couldn't see. The rest of the ball passed in a blur. People who'd never spoken to her suddenly wanted introductions. Men who'd looked through her for years asked her to dance. Lady Ashford herself cornered Lyra near the refreshment table with questions veiled as concern. "Such an unexpected honor," the older woman said, her smile sharp. "The Duke is usually so selective." Lyra smiled and said nothing, channeling Cassian's advice even though she felt like a fraud. By the time their carriage pulled up at midnight, she was exhausted. Regina chattered the entire ride home about what it meant, what would happen next, what Lyra should wear if he called. Eleanor made plans like a general preparing for war. Lyra stared out the window and wondered what she'd just agreed to. The answer came 3 days later, delivered by a courier in Duke Virel's livery. Lyra was in the library, her refuge, the one room in the house where she could usually count on being left alone, when the servant found her. "A letter for you, miss," the girl said, eyes wide. "From the Duke himself." Lyra's hand shook as she broke the seal. The paper was heavy, expensive. The handwriting was sharp and precise. "Miss Halden, I have a proposition that may interest you. Come to Virel House tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Come alone. Tell your family you've been invited for tea. They'll be insufferable about it, but they'll let you go. Wear something practical. We have business to discuss." No flowery language, no false courtesy, just commands, as if her agreement was a foregone conclusion. Lyra read it 3 times, looking for the trick. There had to be a trick. "Well?" Her mother appeared in the doorway. News traveled fast in the Halden household. "What does it say?" Lyra folded the letter carefully. "He's invited me for tea. Tomorrow." Eleanor's eyes gleamed. "Excellent. We'll need to get you properly dressed. Regina, fetch Mrs. Worth. We'll need her opinion on—" "He said to come alone," Lyra interrupted. Silence. Eleanor's expression hardened. "That's highly irregular." "Nevertheless." "Lyra, you can't just—" "Mother." Lyra stood, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "He's a duke. He's asked me to tea. Are you really going to suggest I refuse?" The logic was ironclad, and they both knew it. Eleanor's jaw worked, but she nodded. "Fine, but you'll tell me everything when you return. Everything." That night, Lyra barely slept. She replayed the dance 100 times, looking for clues. What did he want? Why her? What happened tomorrow? When the clock struck 2 the next afternoon, she stood on the steps of Virel House, a massive stone edifice that looked more like a fortress than a home, and wondered if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. A butler answered before she could knock. "Miss Halden, His Grace is expecting you." She followed him through hallways lined with portraits of stern-faced men who all bore a disturbing resemblance to Cassian. The house was beautiful in a cold, intimidating way. No warmth, just power, displayed like a warning. The butler showed her into a study and left without a word. Cassian sat behind a desk covered in papers, still dressed formally despite the hour. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he said. Lyra sat. He finished whatever he was writing, signed it with a flourish, and finally looked at her. In the daylight, he was even more intimidating than he'd been at the ball. Handsome in a harsh way, all sharp edges and cold assessment. "You came," he said. "You commanded it." "I suggested it. You could have refused." "Could I?" His smile was brief and joyless. "Probably not, but the illusion of choice is important. Remember that." Lyra folded her hands in her lap and waited. She'd learned patience in a hard school. Cassian leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same intensity he'd shown on the terrace. "Do you know why I chose you at the ball?" "No." "Honest. Good." He stood, moving to the window. "I need a wife." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. What?" "Not a real one," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "A strategic one, an arrangement. I have political complications that require the appearance of stability. A courtship, an engagement, perhaps a marriage. For show." Lyra's mind reeled. "You're asking me to pretend to be your—" "I'm not asking." He turned to face her. "I'm offering you a choice. Play this role, and I'll give you what you want. Power. Influence. The ability to walk into any room in the city and command respect instead of pity. And what do you get? Cover. Legitimacy. Time to handle my affairs without certain parties breathing down my neck. His expression was unreadable. You'll be compensated, generously, and when this is done, assuming you play your part well, you'll have resources. Independence. A dowry large enough to marry well if you choose, or to never marry at all. It was insane. Completely insane. Why me? Lyra asked. You could have anyone, someone beautiful, someone people expect. Cassian's laugh was harsh. That's exactly why not them. You're perfect because you're unexpected, because you have no power, no connections, nothing to lose. If I chose someone prominent, people would ask questions, look for angles. But you? He moved closer. You're the girl no one sees, which makes you invisible. And invisible is exactly what I need. The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt like clarity. How long? She asked. 6 months. Maybe a year. Depends on how quickly I can resolve my current situation. And if I say no, then you go back to being Eleanor Halden's disappointing daughter, and I find someone else. Though I should mention, his smile turned sharp. I'm very good at getting what I want, and I've decided I want you. Lyra stood on unsteady legs. This was madness. A duke didn't make deals with nobodies. There had to be a catch, something he wasn't telling her. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that surprised her. Honesty. Cold, calculating honesty, but honesty nonetheless. I need to think about it, she said. No, you don't. Cassian returned to his desk. You've already decided. You just need to admit it to yourself. He was right. She had decided. The moment he'd taken her hand on that terrace, maybe even before that, she was tired of being invisible, tired of being the footnote, tired of watching life happen to other people while she stood in the shadows. If this was her one chance to step into the light, even false light, she was going to take it. What do you need me to do? She asked. Cassian's smile was triumphant. First, stop looking like a victim. You're not one anymore. He spent the next hour outlining the rules. They would be seen together at select events. He would call on her at the Halden house. They would take walks, attend dinners, be photographed by the society papers. Every interaction would be calibrated for maximum impact. Your job, he said, is to be charming without being desperate, present without being needy, to look at me like I'm the most fascinating man you've ever met, while never forgetting that this is a performance. And your job? Lyra asked. To make them believe that I've chosen you. And when Duke Cassian Viral chooses something, people pay attention. He walked her to the door himself, a small gesture that somehow felt significant. One more thing, he said as she was leaving. Whatever happens, whatever you hear about me, remember that this is business. Don't make the mistake of believing it's anything more. I won't, Lyra promised. She meant it. She really did. The carriage ride home felt different. The same streets, the same buildings, but Lyra was seeing them through new eyes. She wasn't the girl returning from a humiliating tea. She was someone Duke Virel had chosen. Someone with a secret, a role to play, a purpose. Her mother was waiting when she arrived, practically vibrating with impatience. Well, Lyra smiled. Small, mysterious, exactly like Cassian had taught her. He's calling on me next week for a ride through the park. Eleanor's expression transformed into something Lyra had never seen directed at her. Pride. I knew it. I knew there was something. We'll need new dresses, of course. And you'll need to learn to... Mother, Lyra kept her voice gentle but firm. I can handle it. For the first time in her life, Eleanor Halden looked at her younger daughter and didn't argue. That night, Lyra stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the city lights, and felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Dangerous, intoxicating hope. She was playing a game she barely understood with a man who clearly viewed her as a pawn. The smart thing would be to run, to refuse, to stay in her comfortable, miserable invisibility. But Lyra was done being smart, done being safe. If this was a performance, she was going to give them a show they'd never forget. The first rule of playing a part, Lyra discovered, was that everyone around you became an audience, whether you wanted them to or not. The morning after Cassian's first official call, a calculated promenade through Regent's Park, that had every society matron in the city scrambling for their opera glasses, Eleanor summoned her to the sitting room with the kind of urgency usually reserved for fires or scandals. "Sit," her mother commanded, gesturing to the settee like she was directing a play. "We need to talk about your strategy." Lyra sat, fighting the urge to laugh. Strategy, as if Eleanor had any idea what was actually happening. "There is no strategy, Mother. He asked me to walk. We walked. Don't be dense." Eleanor paced the length of the room, her morning dress swishing with each sharp turn. "A man like Duke Virel doesn't do anything without purpose. He's testing you, seeing if you're worthy of continued attention. And right now, half the city is wondering what he could possibly see in you." The words landed like they always did, precise, cutting, designed to draw blood. But something had shifted in Lyra since that conversation in Cassian's study. The barbs still stung, but they didn't burrow as deep. "Maybe he sees something they don't," Lyra said quietly. Eleanor stopped pacing. "Such as?" "I don't know, but he chose me. Not Regina. Not the Kensington girl or Lady Ashford's daughter, or any of the dozens of women who would kill for his attention. Me." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "Don't let it go to your head. Men like him collect curiosities. The moment you become boring, he'll move on. Then I won't be boring." The door opened and Regina breezed in, still in her nightgown, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked impossibly young and happy, like someone who'd never had to calculate her worth. "Are we talking about the Duke?" she asked, plopping onto the settee beside Lyra. "Because everyone at Lady Pemberton's luncheon yesterday was talking about nothing else. Apparently he hasn't courted anyone seriously in 5 years. Not since—" "Regina," Eleanor cut her off sharply. "What? It's not a secret. Everyone knows about—" "That's enough." Her mother's voice could have frozen water. "We don't discuss that situation. Ever." Lyra looked between them. "What situation?" "Nothing that concerns you," Eleanor said, but something in her expression had shifted, worry, maybe, or warning. "Just be careful, Lyra. The Duke has a reputation for being difficult, complicated." "Most powerful men are," Lyra said, echoing something she'd heard Cassian say. Regina laughed. "Listen to you. 2 weeks ago you couldn't speak to a gentleman without blushing, and now you're discussing the psychology of dukes." She meant it kindly, but the observation stung because it was true. Lyra was changing. She could feel it happening, like a snake shedding skin. The question was whether the thing underneath was stronger or just more exposed. A knock interrupted them. The butler appeared, carrying a silver tray with a single envelope. "Another letter for Miss Lyra," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "From Virel House." Eleanor snatched it before Lyra could react, breaking the seal with the kind of entitlement only mothers possessed. "Miss Halden," she read aloud, "I'll be calling at 7 this evening. Wear something suitable for the theater. We're attending the opening of Mercutio's Revenge. Tell your mother I've arranged for a private box." She lowered the letter, eyes gleaming. "The theater, in a private box. Do you understand what this means?" "That he likes plays?" Lyra suggested. "It means he's claiming you publicly. The opening of Mercutio's Revenge is the event of the season. Everyone will be there. If he's taking you in his box—" Eleanor actually smiled, a real smile, not the tight, disappointed grimace Lyra was used to. "This is bigger than I thought." Regina squeezed Lyra's hand. "This is so exciting. What will you wear? Oh, we should look through your wardrobe right now." "No need," Eleanor interrupted. "I'm sending for Madame Fournier. If Lyra's going to be seen with the Duke, she needs to look the part." The next 6 hours were a whirlwind of fabric pins and Madame Fournier's rapid-fire French as she altered one of Regina's old gowns to fit Lyra's slimmer frame. The dress was deep sapphire blue, Regina's color, not hers. But when Lyra finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You look beautiful," Regina said from the doorway, and she sounded almost wistful. "I look like you," Lyra replied. "No, you look like yourself, just more." At precisely 7 o'clock, Cassian's carriage arrived. Eleanor practically shoved Lyra out the door, hissing last-minute instructions about posture and conversation. Regina waved from the window like Lyra was going off to war. Cassian was already inside the carriage, dressed in black as always, reading what looked like a financial report by lamplight. He glanced up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Blue suits you," he said, though you'll need your own wardrobe. Regina's hand-me-downs won't work for what's coming. Lyra settled across from him, smoothing the borrowed silk. You haven't told me what is coming. No, I haven't. He set down his papers. How are you holding up? I'm fine. Liar. But he said it without heat. Your mother's been insufferable, hasn't she? How did you... Because mothers like Eleanor Halden see their daughters as investments, and you've just become profitable. He leaned back, studying her in the dim light. She'll push. Try to control how you behave, what you say, how you present yourself. Don't let her. Easy for you to say. Is it? Something cold flickered across his face. You think I don't have people trying to control me? At least your mother's motivations are simple. Greed and social climbing I can work with. It's the ones who claim to care about your well-being that are dangerous. The carriage hit a bump, throwing Lyra slightly forward. Cassian's hand shot out, steadying her with a grip that was firm, but not gentle. Thank you, she murmured. He released her immediately. When we arrive, there will be cameras, society reporters, people watching every move. You'll take my arm, keep your head up, and smile like you're exactly where you belong. Can you do that? I think so. Don't think. No. His voice was harder now, the voice of a duke, not whatever he'd been a moment ago. Hesitation reads as weakness. Weakness invites attack. And trust me, Lyra, they will attack. The women because they're jealous, the men because they don't understand, and everyone else because tearing people down is this city's favorite sport. Then why are we doing this? The question burst out before she could stop it. If it's going to be so awful, why? Because awful is useful. Cassian's smile was sharp. Let them attack. Let them whisper and scheme and try to figure out what you're hiding. While they're focused on you, they're not focused on me. That's the whole point. The carriage slowed. Through the window, Lyra could see the theater, all marble columns and golden light, with a crowd gathered outside like moths to a flame. Last chance, Cassian said quietly. Once we step out of this carriage, there's no going back. You'll be linked to me in every paper, every gossip column, every drawing room conversation in the city. Your life as Eleanor Halden's invisible daughter is over. Are you ready for that? Lyra looked at him. This cold, calculating man who'd chosen her for reasons she still didn't fully understand. Then she looked at the crowd outside, all those beautiful, confident people who'd never once looked at her as anything but an afterthought. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Good. He opened the door himself, stepping out first, then turning to offer his hand. Then let's give them something to talk about. The moment Lyra's foot touched the pavement, the world exploded into light and noise. Flash powder from cameras, shouts from reporters, the collective gasp of the crowd as they recognized who was on Duke Faril's arm. Your Grace, who is your companion? Miss Halden. How did you meet the Duke? Are you engaged? Is this an official courtship? Cassian ignored them all, his hand on Lyra's elbow as he guided her toward the entrance. She kept her chin up, her expression neutral, exactly as he'd taught her. But inside, her heart was hammering so hard, she thought it might crack a rib. They were almost to the doors when someone stepped directly into their path. The woman was stunning, golden hair, emerald gown, and a smile that could cut glass. She looked at Cassian with the kind of familiarity that spoke of history. Cassian, she said warmly. What a surprise. I didn't know you'd be attending tonight. Vivienne. His tone was polite but cold. I could say the same. Her eyes slid to Lyra, assessing and dismissing in a single glance. And who is this? Miss Lyra Halden, Cassian said. Lyra, this is Lady Vivienne Ashcroft, an old acquaintance. The pause before acquaintance was deliberate. Lyra didn't need 3 guesses to know what Vivienne had been. How lovely, Vivienne said, her smile never wavering. The Halden girl. I know your sister. She's absolutely charming. The comparison was subtle but unmistakable. Regina was charming, and Lyra was... what? The implication hung in the air. She is, Lyra agreed, keeping her voice steady. I'm very lucky to have her. Indeed, Vivienne's gaze returned to Cassian. I do hope you'll save me a dance at the Pemberton Ball next week, for old time's sake. I'm afraid my dance card is full, Cassian replied. Miss Halden has claimed all my attention these days. It was a lie, they hadn't discussed any ball, but the message was clear. Vivian's smile tightened. How sweet. Young love is always so intense. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the entrance. Don't let me keep you. Enjoy the show. As they moved past her, Lyra could feel Vivian's eyes burning into her back. Friend of yours? She asked once they were inside. Something like that. Cassian's expression was unreadable. Don't worry about her. I'm not worried. Yes, you are. I can feel you shaking. He was right. Lyra's hands were trembling where they rested on his arm. She forced them to still. The private box was everything Eleanor had hoped for, positioned perfectly for maximum visibility, luxuriously appointed, and utterly isolated from the rest of the theater. They could see everyone, and everyone could see them. This is a fishbowl, Lyra said as Cassian helped her into her seat. Yes, that's the idea. He settled beside her, closer than strictly necessary. Look around. What do you see? Lyra scanned the theater. Every box held clusters of beautiful people in expensive clothes, all pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. People watching us, she said. Wrong. People creating narratives. He gestured subtly toward a box across the way. Lady Pemberton is deciding whether to invite you to her ball or cut you entirely. The Thornwell boy is wondering how you managed what his mother's been trying to arrange for years. And Vivian, he nodded toward a box 2 tiers down, is calculating how to destroy you. Lyra's stomach dropped. What? She's threatened by you, which means she'll come after you, probably soon. He leaned back, utterly relaxed. When she does, remember, you have something she doesn't. What's that? Me. His hand covered hers briefly, a gesture clearly visible to anyone watching. Play the part, Lyra. That's all you have to do. The lights dimmed. The play began. And for the next 2 hours, Lyra sat in the dark beside a man she barely knew, acutely aware of every breath, every shift, every moment when his sleeve brushed hers. The play itself was violent, lots of sword fights and betrayal and dramatic deaths. But Lyra couldn't focus on the stage. She was too busy feeling the weight of all those eyes, all that judgment, all that curiosity pressing down on her like a physical thing. At intermission, Cassian stood. Stay here. I'll get us drinks. I can come with you. No. Let them see you alone in my box. It makes a statement. He was already moving toward the door. And Lyra, if anyone tries to enter, tell them you're waiting for me. Don't engage. He left before she could respond. Alone, the box felt enormous. Lyra sat very still, hands folded in her lap, trying to look like she belonged. Below, she could see the crowd mingling, champagne flowing, conversations happening in tight clusters. Regina was there. She spotted her sister's blonde hair near the refreshment table, surrounded by young men. Her mother stood with a group of matrons, probably discussing Lyra's shocking rise. And Vivian was climbing the stairs toward their box. Lyra's pulse spiked. She considered pretending not to notice, but that felt cowardly. Instead, she straightened her spine and met Vivian's eyes as the woman paused in the doorway. May I come in? Vivian asked, though she was already entering. I thought we should have a little chat, woman to woman. The Duke asked me to wait here, Lyra said carefully. Oh, I'm sure he did. Cassian does love his control. Vivian settled into Cassian's vacated seat with the ease of someone who'd sat there before. You're probably wondering about us. It's none of my business. How diplomatic, but also dishonest. Vivian's smile was poisonous. We were engaged, 3 years ago. Everyone assumed we'd marry, but then Cassian decided I wasn't suitable. Too ambitious, he said. Too interested in his title. Lyra kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. I'm sorry that happened. Are you? Vivian leaned closer. Or are you just sorry you're next? I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. You're so young, so naive. Vivian's laugh was soft and cruel. Let me educate you. Cassian doesn't do anything without a reason. He chose you for the same reason he chose me, because you're useful. And the moment you stop being useful, he'll discard you just as thoroughly. The words hit harder than they should have, probably because part of Lyra knew they were true. Thank you for the warning, she managed. It's not a warning, it's a promise. Vivian stood, smoothing her gown. Enjoy your moment in the sun, little Halden. It won't last. And when it ends, When he moves on to whatever actually matters to him, don't say I didn't tell you." She left in a swirl of emerald silk, leaving Lyra alone with her racing thoughts. When Cassian returned with champagne, he took one look at her face and frowned. "Vivian was here," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." "What did she say?" "That you were engaged, that you discarded her, that you'll do the same to me." Lyra met his eyes. "Is she right?" Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then he handed her a glass and sat down. "We were engaged," he said finally. 2 years, not 3. I ended it because she was more interested in my power than anything else. She would have used me, used my name to advance her family's position while plotting behind my back. He took a drink. "So yes, I discarded her because she was dangerous." "And me?" Lyra asked. "Am I useful until I'm dangerous?" "You're useful because you're honest about what this is." Cassian's gaze was steady. "You know this is an arrangement. You're not going to fall in love with me or try to trap me into something real. That makes you safe. Vivian was never safe." It should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like another cage, just a different shape. The lights dimmed for the second act. Lyra sat through it in a haze, barely seeing the stage. When it finally ended and they made their way back to the carriage through another gauntlet of cameras and questions, she felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. "You did well tonight," Cassian said as the carriage pulled away. "Better than I expected, actually." "Vivian hates me." "Good. That means you're a threat." He was reading his papers again, apparently unbothered. "She'll spread rumors, try to undermine you socially. Let her. It just makes you more interesting." "This is insane," Lyra said. "This whole thing is insane." "Yes, but you agreed to it." He looked up, and in the lamplight his face was sharp and strange. "Having second thoughts?" Lyra thought about her mother's pride, Regina's excitement, the way people had looked at her tonight, really looked at her, for the first time in her life. She thought about Vivian's warning, about the fishbowl of the theater box, about how Cassian's hand had felt covering hers. "No," she said, "no second thoughts." "Good." He returned to his papers. "Because tomorrow it gets harder. The Pemberton Ball. Your first real test." The week before the ball was a masterclass in transformation. Cassian sent Madame Fournier to the house with trunks full of gowns, all in darker colors than Lyra usually wore. Deep wines and midnight blues and forest greens. Her mother approved every single one, practically glowing with ambition. Cassian himself appeared twice more, once for another promenade, this time through the fashionable shopping district where they were photographed no less than 7 times, and once for dinner at the Halden house, where he charmed Eleanor and terrified Lyra's father, who'd barely said 2 words to his younger daughter in years. "He's very intense," Regina whispered as they watched Cassian discuss politics with their father. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" "No," Lyra admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The night of the Pemberton Ball, Lyra stood in front of her mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. The gown was dark crimson, cut lower than anything she'd ever worn, with her dark hair swept up to expose her neck and shoulders. She looked older, harder, like someone who could stand beside a duke and not disappear. Cassian arrived exactly on time, but this time, when the butler showed him to the drawing room, he wasn't alone. The man with him was shorter, softer, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He looked completely out of place next to Cassian's sharp edges. "Lyra Halden, this is Marcus Webb, my political advisor," Cassian said. "Marcus, this is Miss Halden." Marcus bowed. "A pleasure. I've heard a great deal about you." "Have you?" Lyra glanced at Cassian, who looked faintly amused. "All good things, I assure you." Marcus's smile was genuine. "I wanted to meet the woman who's managed to capture the Duke's attention. He's usually so dreadfully focused on work." "Marcus is here to brief you," Cassian interrupted. "There are people at tonight's ball you need to know about. Alliances, conflicts, things to avoid." They spent the next 20 minutes in rapid-fire instruction. Lord Pemberton was influential but easily flattered. His wife was sharper and should be handled carefully. The Ashcroft family, Vivian's family, would likely be hostile. The Earl of something or other was someone Cassian needed to impress, which meant Lyra needed to be impressive. "This is too much," Lyra said finally. "I can't remember all of this." "You don't need to remember everything," Marcus said kindly. Just follow the Duke's lead. He's very good at this. Because it's all he does, Cassian said dryly. Politics, strategy, manipulation. Welcome to my world, Miss Halden. Try to keep up. The Pemberton estate made Viral House look modest. The ballroom alone could have held 3 of the Halden house, all crystal and gold and mirrors that reflected the crowd into infinity. The guest list read like a directory of everyone who mattered in the city, and they were all staring at Lyra. Breathe, Cassian murmured as they made their entrance. You belong here because I say you do. That's all that matters. But it didn't feel like all that mattered. It felt like being examined under a microscope, every flaw magnified, every mistake immortalized. Lady Pemberton greeted them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Duke Varel and Miss Halden, how unexpected. Life is full of surprises, Cassian replied smoothly. Thank you for the invitation. Of course. We're always delighted to welcome... She paused, her gaze raking over Lyra. New faces. They moved into the crowd, and immediately people swarmed. Men wanting to curry favor with Cassian, women wanting to assess the competition, everyone wanting to understand what was happening. Lyra smiled until her face hurt, answered questions with carefully rehearsed responses, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. And all the while she could feel Cassian beside her, orchestrating everything with the precision of a conductor. You're doing well, he said during a brief lull. Better than well. I feel like I'm drowning. You are, but you're doing it beautifully. He took 2 glasses of champagne from a passing servant, handing her one. 1 more hour, then we can... Cassian. The voice was male, cultured, and edged with something dangerous. Lyra turned to see a man approaching, tall, blonde, handsome in a way that felt calculated. He looked at Cassian like they were old enemies forced to be civil. Nathaniel, Cassian replied, his tone cooling several degrees. I didn't know you'd returned from the continent. Last week. Couldn't miss the Pemberton ball. Nathaniel's eyes slid to Lyra. And you must be the famous Miss Halden. I'm Nathaniel Ashcroft, Vivian's brother. Of course he was. A pleasure, Lyra said, though it wasn't. Is it? Nathaniel smiled, and it was nothing like Marcus's warm grin. This smile was a weapon. I'm curious, Miss Halden, what exactly did you do to catch the Duke's eye? My sister's been trying for years, and here you are, having accomplished it in mere weeks. Nathaniel, Cassian's voice was soft, but it carried a warning that made even Lyra's spine straighten. Walk away. Why? I'm just making conversation. No. Being an ass, there's a difference. Cassian shifted, placing himself slightly between Lyra and Nathaniel. I suggest you find someone else to antagonize. For a moment, Nathaniel looked like he might push back. Then his smile widened. Of course. Enjoy your evening. He nodded to Lyra. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving tension in his wake. I'm sorry, Cassian said quietly. I should have warned you about him. Another ex? Worse. A rival. He drained his champagne. The Ashcrofts want what I have. Power, influence, connections. Vivian tried to get it through marriage. Nathaniel prefers more direct methods. Like what? Like destroying anyone who stands in his way. Cassian's expression was grim. Which now includes you. Congratulations. Before Lyra could respond, the music shifted. A waltz. Couples flooded the dance floor. Cassian extended his hand. Dance with me. It wasn't a question. Lyra took his hand and he led her onto the floor with the same commanding certainty he did everything. His hand at her waist was firm, his grip on her hand unyielding. They moved together with a precision that came from his leading and her following. No harmony between them, just execution. Everyone's still watching, Lyra said. They always will be. Get used to it. Do you ever wish they wouldn't? That you could just exist without being observed? Cassian's expression flickered, something almost vulnerable crossing his face before the mask slammed back down. Every day, but wishing doesn't change reality. They danced in silence for a moment. Then Lyra said, Vivian told me you used her. Is that true? We used each other. The difference is I was honest about it. She wasn't. He spun her, and she stumbled slightly. His hand tightened, keeping her upright. Is this about her or about us? I don't know what us is. It's an arrangement. That's all it needs to be. But what if... She stopped herself. What if what? His eyes searched hers. What if it becomes something more? It won't, Lyra. I don't have the capacity for that. And you shouldn't want it anyway. The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt like honesty, brutal and clean. The song ended. Cassian released her immediately, stepping back with the formality of a stranger. I need to speak with Lord Pemberton, he said. Stay here. Marcus will find you. And then he was gone, leaving Lyra alone in the middle of the dance floor while the crowd swirled around her. She made her way to the edge of the room, accepting another glass of champagne she didn't want. Her feet hurt. Her face hurt from smiling. Everything hurt. There you are? Regina appeared like a guardian angel, linking arms with Lyra. I've been looking for you everywhere. Are you all right? You look exhausted. I am exhausted. Well, you're also the talk of the ball. Everyone wants to know how you did it. Regina's expression was proud and worried in equal measure. Are you happy, Lyra? Really happy? It was such a simple question, and Lyra had no idea how to answer it. Before she could try, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Raised voices, someone laughing too loud, the sound of glass breaking. The crowd parted, and Lyra saw Cassian standing face to face with Nathaniel Ashcroft. Both men looked murderous. You need to learn your place, Nathaniel was saying, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. My place? Cassian's laugh was cold. I'm a Duke, Ashcroft. My place is wherever I decide it is. And hers? Nathaniel pointed at Lyra, his gesture dismissive and cruel. Where's her place? Because from where I'm standing, she's just the latest in a long line of women you've used to avoid dealing with anything real. The crowd gasped. Lyra felt like she'd been slapped. Cassian's expression went deadly. Say that again. You heard me, Nathaniel smiled. We all know this is a sham. Whatever game you're playing, using that poor girl as a pawn, it's pathetic. Everyone can see it. Nathaniel, that's enough. Lord Pemberton appeared, his face red. This is unseemly. But the damage was done. The words were out there, hanging in the air like poison. Lyra could feel every eye in the room on her, judging, pitying, knowing. Cassian's hands were clenched into fists. For a terrible moment, Lyra thought he might actually hit Nathaniel. Instead, he turned and walked straight toward her. We're leaving, he said. Cassian, wait. Now. He took her arm, not gently, and steered her toward the exit. Behind them, the crowd erupted into whispers. The carriage ride back was silent and suffocating. Cassian stared out the window, his jaw so tight Lyra could see the muscle jumping. She sat across from him, still processing what had just happened, what Nathaniel had said, how thoroughly their carefully constructed illusion had just been shattered. I'm sorry, she said finally. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't apologize for him. But he's right, isn't he? Everyone knows this is fake. We're not fooling anyone. He's not right. Cassian turned to face her, and his eyes were blazing. He's a jealous, small-minded fool who can't stand that I have something he wants. What? Me? Lyra laughed bitterly. I'm nobody, Cassian. You said so yourself. I'm useful because I'm invisible. You're not invisible anymore. He leaned forward, intense and almost angry. That's the whole damn point. You stopped being invisible the moment I chose you. Why did you choose me? The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. Really, not the political reasons or the strategic value. Why me? Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, because you reminded me of someone I used to be. Before I learned that caring about things makes you weak. The confession hung between them, fragile and dangerous. The carriage stopped at the Halden house. Cassian opened the door but didn't get out. Tomorrow, he said, the papers will be full of what happened tonight. Your mother will panic. People will say terrible things. But if you walk away now, if you let Nathaniel win, it proves everything he said. And if I stay, then we make them regret ever doubting you. His smile was sharp and dangerous. But that's your choice, Lyra. I can't make it for you. She stood in the doorway looking at this complicated, damaged man who'd pulled her into a game she still didn't fully understand. I'm not walking away, she said. Something like respect flickered in Cassian's eyes. Good, because tomorrow we go to war. The morning papers were worse than Lyra had imagined. She sat in the breakfast room at dawn, still in her nightgown, spreading them across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Each headline was sharper than the last. Duke's mystery companion, fraud or fortune hunter? Ashcroft Air questions. Viral's recent romance society divided. Is Miss Halden the real thing or an elaborate ruse? The words blurred together after a while. Some called her calculating. Others called her pathetic. One particularly vicious columnist suggested she'd somehow tricked Cassian into the arrangement, as if she had that kind of power. Another implied she was exactly what Nathaniel had called her, a convenient pawn in whatever game Cassian was actually playing. None of them considered that maybe, just maybe, she was a person making choices. That seemed beyond their comprehension. Stop reading those. Lyra looked up to find Regina in the doorway, her hair loose, concern written across her face. I can't, Lyra said. I need to know what they're saying. Why? So you can torture yourself? Regina crossed the room and started gathering the papers. These people don't know you. They're making up stories because that's what they do. But what if they're right? The question came out smaller than Lyra intended. What if I am just a pawn? Regina sat down hard, still clutching the newspapers. Do you feel like a pawn? I don't know what I feel. Then maybe that's your answer. Her sister's voice was gentle but firm. Lyra, I've watched you change these past few weeks. You stand taller, you speak up, you don't disappear into corners anymore. Whatever this thing with the Duke is, it's making you stronger. That doesn't sound like a pawn to me. Before Lyra could respond, their mother's voice rang through the house like a bell at a funeral. Lyra! Drawing room! Now! Regina winced. Good luck. Eleanor was already dressed for battle, deep purple gown, hair severe, expression like she could cut diamonds with her cheekbones. She stood by the fireplace with the morning scandal sheets spread across the mantel like trophies of war. Explain this, she demanded. There's nothing to explain, Mother. Nathaniel Ashcroft made a scene. The papers are capitalizing on it. Made a scene? Eleanor's laugh was brittle. He publicly questioned your legitimacy, called you a pawn, suggested the Duke is using you, and you think that's just a scene? What would you like me to do about it? Fight back, defend yourself. Eleanor paced, her skirt snapping with each turn. Or better yet, get Cassian to defend you. One word from him could end this entire debacle. But he said nothing, done nothing, which makes me wonder. She stopped, pinning Lyra with a look that could peel paint. Is Nathaniel right? Is this all some elaborate game? The question hung there, ugly and honest. Would it matter if it was? Lyra asked. Would you care as long as I was still associated with the Duke? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Don't get clever with me. You're in over your head, and you know it. These people, the Ashcrofts, the Pembertons, all of them, they'll eat you alive if you show weakness, and right now you look very weak. Then I'll get stronger. How? By hoping Cassian will save you. Her mother's voice dripped with scorn. Men like him don't save anyone but themselves. I thought you were smarter than that. The words stung because they echoed Lyra's own fears. But she kept her face neutral, her voice steady. I never asked him to save me, she said, and I'm not asking you to either. She left before Eleanor could respond, taking the stairs 2 at a time to her room. Her hands were shaking, her chest felt tight, but underneath the fear was something harder, sharper, anger. She was angry at Nathaniel for his public cruelty, angry at the papers for their gleeful dissection of her life, angry at her mother for caring more about social standing than her daughter's actual well-being, and angry at Cassian for pulling her into this mess and then disappearing when things got ugly. The knock on her door came an hour later. The maid looked nervous. Miss Lyra, there's a gentleman here to see you. Mr. Webb, he says, from the Duke's household. Marcus was waiting in the drawing room looking rumpled and worried. He stood when Lyra entered, offering a small bow. Miss Halden, I apologize for the early intrusion. Is Cassian here? She couldn't keep the edge from her voice. No, he sent me. Marcus pulled out a sealed envelope. He wanted me to deliver this personally. Lyra took it, breaking the seal with more force than necessary. The note was brief. Oh, don't read the papers. Don't respond to questions. Don't let them see you rattled. I'm handling Nathaniel. You handle yourself. Trust me. See. She read it twice, looking for something that felt like actual support. found only commands. He's serious about this war metaphor, isn't he? She said. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The Duke doesn't make idle threats. If he says he's handling Nathaniel, he is. And what am I supposed to do in the meantime? Hide? Actually, Marcus pulled out another paper, this one covered in Cassian's sharp handwriting. He's arranged a series of appearances. Luncheon with Lady Thornwell tomorrow, tea with the Duchess of Carrington on Wednesday, the opera Friday night. He wants you visible, composed, and completely unbothered by the scandal. Lyra stared at the list. He wants me to perform. He wants you to win. Marcus's voice was kind but firm. I know this is difficult, but the Duke is very good at this sort of thing. If you follow his lead, I'm not a trained dog, Marcus. No, you're a woman who agreed to play a role, and right now that role requires you to look like someone who belongs exactly where she is. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I think you're doing remarkably well, better than most people would in your position. The kindness in his voice nearly broke something in Lyra's chest. She blinked hard. Thank you, she managed. That actually helps. Good. Because there's one more thing. Marcus looked genuinely uncomfortable now. The Duke needs you at Viral House this afternoon. There's someone you need to meet, someone who can help with the situation. What situation? All of it. Viral House felt different in daylight, less imposing, more like a mausoleum. The butler showed Lyra to a different room this time, smaller than the study, lined with books that looked actually read rather than decorative. Cassian was there, standing by the window, with another man Lyra didn't recognize. This one was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen too much to be shocked by anything. Lyra, Cassian said, turning. He looked tired, she realized, actually tired with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. Thank you for coming. This is Jonathan Pierce. He manages my public affairs. Public affairs? Lyra repeated. You mean he spins scandals? Pierce's laugh was dry. Among other things. Please sit. We have a lot to discuss. She sat. Cassian remained standing, his posture rigid. I've read the morning papers, Pierce began without preamble. Nathaniel Ashcroft's accusations, while crude, have raised questions we need to address. The narrative right now is that you're either a gold digger or a victim, neither of which serves our purposes. Our purposes, Lyra echoed. Not mine. Yours. If you're linked to the Duke, your purposes and his are the same. Pierce leaned forward. Here's what we're going to do. First, we establish your credibility. You have education, correct? Accomplishments? I read a lot. I speak French. I can play piano badly. Lyra's voice was flat. Nothing impressive. We'll work with what we have. The key is to make you interesting without making you threatening. Smart, but not too smart. Cultured, but not pretentious. A woman of substance who caught the Duke's eye through genuine connection, not calculation. Even though that's exactly what this is, calculation. Pierce didn't even blink. Miss Halden, every successful relationship in this city is built on calculation. We just need to make yours look like fate. Lyra turned to Cassian, who'd been silent through the entire exchange. Is this what you want? Me turned into some palatable fiction? I want you protected, Cassian said quietly. Nathaniel came after you because he knows it's the easiest way to hurt me. If we don't control this narrative, he will, and his version won't be kind. Neither is this one. You're asking me to lie about who I am. No, I'm asking you to emphasize certain truths and minimize others. He moved closer, his expression intense. You are educated. You are cultured. You did catch my attention. None of that is false. We're just presenting it strategically. It feels like erasure. It's survival. Cassian's voice was hard now. This is how this world works, Lyra. You can either adapt or be destroyed. There's no third option. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that maybe destruction was preferable to becoming someone she didn't recognize. But when she looked at his face, at the genuine worry beneath the commanding exterior, she saw something that stopped her. He actually cared whether she survived this. Maybe not for the right reasons, but he cared. Fine, she said. What do I need to do? The next 3 days were a masterclass in manufactured authenticity. Luncheon with Lady Thornwell involved carefully rehearsed answers to invasive questions about how she and Cassian met, what she loved about him, whether they'd discussed marriage. Lyra smiled and demurred and said all the right things while feeling like she was selling pieces of herself. Tea with the Duchess of Carrington was worse. The woman was 80 if she was a day, sharp as a blade, and clearly saw through every word Lyra said. But she was also Cassian's godmother, and her approval carried weight. So Lyra endured 2 hours of pointed questions and knowing looks, all while maintaining the fiction Pierce had constructed. "You're better at this than you think," Cassian said afterward, handing her into his carriage. "The Duchess said you have backbone. From her, that's high praise." "I don't feel like I have backbone. I feel like a puppet." "Puppets don't talk back to their godmothers." He actually smiled, brief and genuine. "You held your ground when she suggested you were fortune hunting. That took courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." The opera on Friday was the real test. Pierce had arranged for them to be photographed arriving, to be seen in Cassian's box, to be the picture of a couple completely unbothered by scandal. Lyra wore another of Madame Fournier's creations, black this time, severe and elegant, and practiced her unbothered expression in the mirror until it felt almost real. The cameras were blinding, the crowd was enormous, and somewhere in that sea of faces, Lyra knew the Ashcrofts were watching, waiting for her to fail. She didn't fail. She smiled. She took Cassian's arm. She walked into that opera house like she owned it. The box was the same one from the theater. Cassian helped her with her wrap, his hands lingering on her shoulders just long enough for the people watching to notice. "Breathe," he murmured. "You're doing perfectly." "I feel sick." "Good. Beer keeps you sharp." He settled into his seat, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Just remember, you're here because I want you here. That's all that matters." The opera was something Italian and tragic. Lyra couldn't follow the plot, too aware of the eyes on them, the whispers just loud enough to hear, but she kept her expression serene, her posture perfect, exactly as Pierce had coached. Intermission came like a reprieve. Cassian stood, offering his hand. "Walk with me. Let them see us together." They descended to the main hall, where champagne flowed and conversations stopped as they passed. Lyra could feel the assessment, the judgment, the curiosity burning into her skin. "Miss Halden." Vivienne appeared as if summoned, beautiful and venomous in silver silk, but her smile was different tonight, less confident, more calculating. "Lady Ashcroft," Lyra said evenly, "I wanted to apologize for my brother's behavior at the Pemberton ball. He can be so passionate." Her eyes flickered to Cassian. "I hope there are no hard feelings." It was a trap. Lyra could feel it. "Of course not," she said. "We all say things we don't mean when emotions run high." "Do we?" Vivian's smile sharpened. "How diplomatic." "Cassian, you've chosen well. She's very good at saying nothing while appearing to say something. A useful skill in this company," Cassian replied. His hand found the small of Lyra's back, possessive, protective. "If you'll excuse us." They moved away, but Vivian's voice followed them. "Enjoy the second act. I hear the ending is particularly tragic." Back in the box, Cassian was tense. "She's planning something," he said. "How do you know?" "Because she was being nice. Vivian is never nice without reason." He turned to face her. "Lyra, I need you to be careful. The Ashcrofts are dangerous when they feel cornered, and right now they're very cornered." "Because of me?" "Because of what you represent. A disruption to their plans." His expression was grim. "Just promise me you'll be careful. No walking alone, no accepting invitations without checking with Marcus first, no—" "Cassian," she put her hand over his. "I'm not an idiot. I know they're dangerous." He looked down at their joined hands like he was seeing something unexpected. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned his palm up and laced his fingers through hers. "I know you're not an idiot," he said quietly. "That's what worries me." The moment stretched, strange and charged. Then the lights dimmed for the second act, and Cassian released her hand, settling back into his seat like nothing had happened. But Lyra's palm still tingled where he'd touched her, and that scared her more than anything Vivian could do. The attack came 3 days later, swift and brutal. Lyra was in the Halden drawing room, responding to the flood of invitations that had arrived since the opera, when Regina burst in with a newspaper clutched in her hand. "Lyra, you need to see this." The headline made Lyra's blood run cold. "Duke's companion has secret past. Former betrothal to country merchant revealed." She snatched the paper, scanning the article with growing horror. It was all there, twisted, exaggerated, but rooted in enough truth to be damaging. Her brief failed courtship with Thomas Harrington 2 years ago. How his family had broken it off when her dowry proved insufficient. How she'd been quietly returned to her family like a rejected piece of merchandise. "It's not a secret," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "It happened. Everyone knew." "Not everyone," Regina said gently. "Not the people who matter now. And the way they're telling it, Lyra, they're making it sound like you were damaged goods. Like you're with Cassian because no one else would have you." Lyra read the article again, catching the subtle implications, the carefully chosen words. Whoever had fed this story to the papers knew exactly how to make her look desperate. The Ashcrofts. It had to be. "I need to see Cassian," she said, already moving toward the door. "Lyra, wait." But she was already gone, calling for the carriage, not caring that it was barely past 9 in the morning, or that showing up at Virel House unannounced was wildly inappropriate. She needed answers. She needed help. She needed him. The butler looked startled when she appeared on the doorstep, windblown and furious. "I need to see the Duke. Now." "His Grace is in a meeting, Miss Halden. If you'd like to wait—" "I don't want to wait." She pushed past him, heading for Cassian's study. "Where is he?" "Miss Halden, please." She found him in the library, not the study, standing at a massive table covered in maps and documents. But he wasn't alone. Nathaniel Ashcroft stood across from him, the two men clearly in the middle of a tense negotiation. They both turned as Lyra entered. Cassian's expression went from surprise to anger in a heartbeat. "Lyra, what are you—" "You." She pointed at Nathaniel, too furious to be strategic. "Was this you? The article about Thomas Harrington?" Nathaniel's smile was slow and cruel. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Liar." "Miss Halden," he said, his tone mocking. "Such accusations. Do you have proof?" "I have common sense. You stood up at the Pemberton ball and called me a pawn. 3 days later, there's a hit piece about my failed courtship. That's not coincidence." "Perhaps not." Nathaniel's gaze slid to Cassian. "Or perhaps you're simply not as interesting as you thought. People dig into backgrounds. It happens." "Nathaniel," Cassian's voice was deadly quiet. "Get out." "We're not finished." "We are now. Get out of my house before I throw you out." For a moment, Nathaniel looked like he might argue. Then he straightened his jacket, offered Lyra a mocking bow, and left. The silence he left behind was suffocating. "What was he doing here?" Lyra demanded. "That's none of your concern. None of my—" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You pulled me into this, made me a target, and now you're having secret meetings with the man who's trying to destroy me, and I'm supposed to just accept that?" "Yes." Cassian's face was granite. "You're supposed to trust that I know what I'm doing." "How can I trust you when you won't tell me anything?" She moved closer, anger making her reckless. "What were you discussing? What deal are you making with him?" "The kind that keeps you safe." "By sacrificing what? Your pride? Your position?" She was shouting now. "Or me?" The words hung between them like an accusation. Cassian's expression shifted, something like pain flashing across his features before the mask slammed back down. "I would never sacrifice you," he said quietly. "Then tell me what's happening." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely lost. "Because the less you know, the safer you are. The Ashcrofts want leverage. If I tell you everything, you become leverage. Do you understand?" Lyra stared at him, this complicated, infuriating man who spoke in riddles and called it protection. "No," she said. "I don't understand. I don't understand any of this. I'm supposed to be your partner in this arrangement, but you treat me like a child who needs protecting. You ask me to trust you while keeping me in the dark. And now there's an article out there making me look like desperate trash. And you were standing here negotiating with the man who probably planted it. So, no, Cassian, I don't understand." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed to his desk, pulled out a folder, and handed it to her. The Ashcrofts have been embezzling from Crown contracts for 2 years, he said. I have proof, enough to destroy them completely. That's what Nathaniel was here about. He was trying to negotiate a truce, agree to leave you alone in exchange for me burying the evidence. Lyra opened the folder. Inside were documents, ledgers, correspondence, all meticulously organized, all damning. You have all this? And you're negotiating with him? Because if I expose them now, they'll burn everything trying to take me down with them, including you. Cassian's voice was tight. They'll manufacture scandals, spread lies, destroy your reputation so thoroughly you'll never recover. I'm trying to find a way to neutralize them without collateral damage. I'm the collateral damage, Lyra said slowly. That's what this is. You're protecting me by containing them. Yes. She looked at the folder, at the evidence of real corruption, real criminality. Then she looked at Cassian, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What did you tell him? She asked. When he offered the truce? That I needed time to consider. And do you? Need time? Cassian's jaw tightened. I need to make sure you're not destroyed in the crossfire, so yes, I need time. Lyra closed the folder and set it on the desk. Her hands were steady, even though everything inside her was shaking. I don't want you to protect me, she said. I want you to destroy them. Lyra, they attacked me. Not you, me. And if you let them walk away from that, if you let them win because you're worried about my reputation, she stopped, forcing herself to meet his eyes. Then they were right. I am just a pawn, something to be moved around and protected and kept in the dark. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Cassian moved closer, and she could see the conflict written across his face. Duty versus desire. Strategy versus something rawer. It's me trying to keep you safe, he said. Because the alternative, watching them tear you apart, is not something I can accept. Why? The question came out barely above a whisper. Why do you care what happens to me? He was so close now she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands had curled into fists like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. Because you're not supposed to matter, he said, his voice rough. This was supposed to be simple. An arrangement. A strategy. But somewhere along the way you started mattering and I don't know how to make it stop. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and completely unexpected. Lyra's breath caught. Cassian! The door burst open. Marcus stood there, pale and breathing hard. Your Grace, we have a problem. The Ashcrofts just released another article about Miss Halden's mother. Cassian's expression went cold. What about her mother? Eleanor Halden's gambling debts. Apparently they've been accumulating for years. The article suggests Miss Halden's interest in you is financially motivated, that she's trying to secure a wealthy match to save her family from ruin. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. Her mother's debts. She'd known Eleanor gambled, everyone did, but she'd had no idea they were serious enough to be weaponized. How bad? She asked, her voice surprisingly steady. Marcus handed her the paper. The headline screamed, Fortune Hunter's Desperate Gamble, Halden Family Faces Financial Collapse. It was worse than bad. It was devastating. Cassian took the paper from her hands, scanned it, and threw it across the room. That's it, he said. We're done playing nice. What are you going to do? Lyra asked. He looked at her, and his expression was terrifying in its cold certainty. I'm going to give them exactly what they wanted. War. He moved to his desk, pulling out paper and pen, writing with sharp, violent strokes. Marcus, get this to the Times immediately. I want it in tomorrow's morning edition. Your Grace, are you sure? Do it. Marcus took the paper and left. Lyra moved closer, reading over Cassian's shoulder. It was a statement, brief, sharp, and absolutely incendiary. He was calling out the Ashcrofts by name, questioning their business practices, suggesting an investigation was warranted. This will destroy them, she said. That's the idea. It will also destroy any chance of a truce. They'll come after us with everything they have. Let them. Cassian turned to face her. I'm done protecting them from consequences, and I'm done watching them hurt you. Something in Lyra's chest cracked open. This man, cold, calculating, strategic Cassian, was going to war. For her. What if they fight back, she asked. What if they have more ammunition? Then we'll deal with it. He touched her face, brief and gentle. Together. No more keeping you in the dark. No more treating you like something fragile. If we're doing this, we're doing it as partners. Partners, Lyra repeated. The word felt significant somehow. Yes. Unless you'd rather... She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't strategic. She just reached up and pressed her lips to his, cutting off whatever he was about to say. For a heartbeat, Cassian froze. Then his hands came up to frame her face, and he was kissing her back, fierce and almost desperate, like he'd been holding himself back for weeks and had finally broken. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, his expression was stunned. That was a mistake, he said. Probably. This complicates everything. I know. We should... Stop talking, Lyra said, and kissed him again. This time when they broke apart, Cassian's laugh was breathless. You're going to be the death of me, he said. Good. You deserve it. The moment shattered as the door opened again. This time it was the butler, looking even more distressed. Your Grace, there are men here, from the magistrate's office. They're asking for you. Cassian's expression went blank. About what? They wouldn't say, but they're insisting it's urgent. Lyra felt ice creep down her spine. What's happening? I don't know. Cassian was already moving toward the door. Stay here. Don't leave this room. Cassian. Stay. Here. He left, the butler trailing behind him. Lyra stood in the library, heart pounding, replaying the last 5 minutes. The kiss, the confession, the sudden appearance of magistrates. She moved to the door, pressing her ear against it, voices in the hallway. Cassian's, low and controlled. Someone else's, official and cold. Then one sentence, clear enough to hear, Duke Varel, you're under investigation for fraud and conspiracy. We'll need you to come with us. The world tilted. Lyra wrenched open the door in time to see 2 men in official uniforms flanking Cassian. His face was pale, but composed. This is absurd, he was saying. On whose authority? Lord Nathaniel Ashcroft has presented evidence suggesting financial irregularities in several crown contracts you've overseen. The magistrate's voice was flat. We're required to investigate. Lyra felt the air leave her lungs. The evidence. The folder of documents showing the Ashcrofts' embezzlement. Somehow, impossibly, they'd turned it around and made it look like Cassian was the guilty party. Cassian's eyes found hers across the hallway. In them, she saw fury and resignation, and something that might have been fear. It's going to be fine, he said. Marcus will handle... Sir, we need to go now. They led him away. Actually led him out of his own house like a criminal. And Lyra stood there, frozen, watching the man who'd just declared war on her behalf get arrested for crimes he didn't commit. The door closed. The house fell silent. And Lyra realized with terrifying clarity that she was now completely alone in a war she barely understood, facing enemies who'd just proven they were willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. The silence in Varel house after they took Cassian was absolute. Not peaceful, suffocating, like the air itself had turned against her. Lyra stood in the hallway for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, staring at the door he'd been led through. Her mind kept replaying it. The magistrate's flat voices, Cassian's controlled fury, the way he'd looked at her like he was memorizing her face. Miss Halden. She turned to find Marcus standing there, his usually kind face drawn tight with worry. We need to talk, he said. Now. He led her back to the library, closing the door with careful precision. When he turned to face her, she saw something she'd never seen in him before. Fear. How bad is this? She asked. Worse than you think. Marcus moved to Cassian's desk, pulling out files with shaking hands. The Ashcrofts didn't just fabricate evidence. They've been planning this for months. Every document, every witness statement, every financial irregularity, it all points to Cassian. They've made it look like he was the one embezzling from crown contracts and tried to frame them when he got caught. Lyra's legs felt weak. She sat down hard. But that's insane. He has proof they're the ones... Had proof. Past tense. Marcus's voice was hollow. The documents Cassian showed you? The ledgers proving the Ashcrofts' guilt? They've been doctored. Someone got to them. Now they implicate Cassian instead. That's impossible. Those files were in his study. Who could have... She stopped. Remembered Nathaniel standing in this very room earlier. How long had he been here before she arrived? What had he touched? He switched them, she said slowly. Nathaniel. While he was here negotiating, he switched the real evidence for forgeries. Marcus nodded grimly. That would be my guess. And now every piece of documentation that could have saved Cassian is being used to destroy him. Lyra felt something cold settle in her chest. Not panic, not fear, something sharper. What happens now? She asked. She eats. There will be an investigation. Could take weeks, months, and during that time, Cassian's reputation will be shredded. His business deals will collapse. His political allies will distance themselves. Marcus looked at her with something like pity. And you, Miss Halden, will be caught in the crossfire. They'll paint you as his accomplice or his victim. Either way, you're ruined. Unless I walk away. Unless you walk away, he agreed quietly. No one would blame you. This isn't your fight. Lyra stood, moving to the window. Outside, the city carried on like nothing had changed. People walking, carriages rolling, life continuing while hers imploded. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 weeks ago, the one who hid in corners and accepted her place in the shadows. That girl would have run, would have disappeared back into invisibility and called herself lucky to escape. But that girl was gone. Where are they holding him? She asked. The magistrate's holding cells, but Miss Halden, you can't see him. They won't allow... I'm not asking permission. She turned to face Marcus, and she could see her own reflection in the window behind him. Dark dress, sharp eyes, someone she barely recognized. I need paper, and I need you to deliver messages for me. Marcus stared at her. What are you planning? Something stupid. Her smile felt dangerous. Or brilliant. I haven't decided which yet. The first message went to Regina. I need every piece of gossip you've ever heard about the Ashcrofts. Everything, even the things people whisper about but can't prove. Meet me at the Halden house in 2 hours. Don't tell Mother. The second went to Jonathan Pierce, Cassian's public affairs man. Duke Viral is under investigation. The Ashcrofts orchestrated it. I have a plan to fight back, but I need your expertise. Come to Viral House immediately. The third was the riskiest. She addressed it to Lady Pemberton, social queen, gossip maven, and someone who'd never looked at Lyra with anything but thinly veiled contempt. I have information about the Ashcroft family that will interest you. Information that could shift the entire social landscape of this city. If you want it, meet me at the Thornwell Tea Room tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Marcus read the messages with growing alarm. This is madness, he said. Lady Pemberton will laugh you out of the room. Or worse, she'll tell the Ashcrofts you're digging. Let her tell them. Lyra sealed the final envelope. I want them to know I'm coming. Miss Halden. Lyra. Marcus looked genuinely distressed. You're not equipped for this. These people are vipers. They'll eat you alive. Then I'll make sure I bite first. She handed him the messages. Please, Cassian went to war for me. The least I can do is return the favor. Something in Marcus's expression shifted. He took the messages. He's going to kill me for helping you with this, he said. Only if we lose. Regina arrived at the Halden house exactly 2 hours later, breathless and clutching a notebook. I wrote down everything I could remember, she said, pulling Lyra into her room and shutting the door. But Lyra, are you sure about this? Mother's downstairs having hysterics about the Duke's arrest. She's saying you need to distance yourself immediately before... I'm not distancing myself. Regina blinked. You're not? No, I'm fighting back. Lyra took the notebook, scanning Regina's neat handwriting. Tell me what you found. Okay, Regina settled onto the bed, her expression uncertain. Vivian Ashcroft was engaged twice before Cassian. Both times it fell apart. Rumor is she was caught with someone else. Her family paid to keep it quiet. Good. What else? Nathaniel failed out of military academy. Something about gambling debts and questionable associates. His father used connections to bury it. Better. Keep going. Regina's eyes widened as she realized what Lyra was doing. You're building ammunition. I'm building a case. If the Ashcrofts want to destroy people through scandal, I'll use their own weapons against them. Lyra, that's... Regina stopped, studying her sister like she was seeing a stranger. When did you get so ruthless? About 5 minutes after they arrested an innocent man and tried to ruin my life. Lyra's voice was calm, almost cold. I'm done being the girl who takes hits and stays quiet. Tell me everything else. They spent the next hour combing through every piece of gossip, every whispered rumor, every scandal the Ashcrofts had ever tried to bury. By the time they finished, Lyra had pages of ammunition. It wasn't all provable. Some of it was pure speculation. But that was the beauty of scandal. You didn't need proof. You just needed doubt. Jonathan Pierce arrived at Viral House that evening, looking harried and skeptical. Miss Halden, I'm not sure what you think I can... I need you to plant stories, Lyra interrupted. Small ones. Whispers in the right ears. Can you do that? Pierce's expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued. What kind of stories? She handed him the notebook. He read, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. This is everything they've tried to keep buried, he said finally. If even half of this got out, it would make them look like hypocrites. They've been destroying people's reputations for years while hiding their own scandals. Lyra leaned forward. I don't need you to prove any of it. I just need you to make people wonder. Make them question whether the Ashcrofts are as pristine as they pretend. And what does that accomplish? It shifts the narrative. Right now, everyone believes Cassian is guilty because the Ashcrofts seem credible. But if the Ashcrofts suddenly look suspect themselves, people start questioning their evidence. Pierce's smile was slow and calculating. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Miss Halden. Everyone is, Lyra said. That's been my advantage all along. Pierce stood, tucking the notebook into his jacket. I can have whispers circulating by tomorrow morning. But Miss Halden, you understand this is a long game. Rumors take time to spread. The Duke's investigation won't wait. I know. That's why I have another plan for that. Which is? I'm going to find the real evidence, the original documents before Nathaniel switched them. Pierce stared at her. You think they still exist? I think people like the Ashcrofts keep insurance. Backup plans. If I can find where they've hidden the originals, I can prove Cassian's innocent. That's insane. You have no idea where to look, no access to their properties, no... I have motivation. And apparently, I have a talent for this. Lyra stood, showing him to the door. Just handle the gossip. Leave the rest to me. After Pierce left, Marcus found her in Cassian's study, going through filing cabinets. What are you looking for? He asked. Anything about the Ashcrofts, business dealings, social connections, property records? There has to be something here that tells me where they'd hide documents. Lyra, even if you find something, you can't just break into the Ashcroft estate. Watch me. Marcus crossed the room, physically turning her to face him. Listen to me. You're angry. I understand that. But this kind of recklessness will get you killed or arrested or both. The Duke would never forgive me if I let you. The Duke doesn't get a say right now. Lyra's voice was hard. He's locked up. I'm not. So I'm the one who gets to decide what happens next. By risking everything? Yes. She pulled away from him, returning to the files. Because risking everything is better than doing nothing while they destroy him. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. If you're determined to do this, at least let me help. I know the Ashcroft properties. I know their staff, their routines. If we're going to break in somewhere, we should at least do it intelligently. Lyra looked up, surprised. You're going to help me? I'm going to keep you from getting yourself killed. There's a difference. But his smile was tired and fond. Besides, the Duke would want someone looking out for you. Might as well be me. They worked through the night, building a plan that was equal parts strategy and desperation. The Ashcrofts had 3 properties in the city, the main estate, a townhouse in the financial district, and a country villa about 10 miles out. Marcus thought the townhouse was most likely. Nathaniel uses it for business meetings, private negotiations, things he doesn't want his father knowing about. Marcus spread blueprints across the desk. He'd gotten them from the city archives, a detail Lyra decided not to question. If he's keeping backup evidence, it would be there, in his private office. How do we get in? There's a servant's entrance in the back. And I know one of the housemaids. She might be willing to help, for the right price. I have jewelry, Regina's old things. Mother won't notice if they go missing. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Lyra, you understand this could go catastrophically wrong. If we're caught, then we're caught. But at least we tried. The meeting with Lady Pemberton the next day was its own kind of gamble. Lyra arrived at the Thornwell tea room exactly at noon, wearing one of her new gowns, dark green, elegant, the kind of thing that said she refused to be intimidated. Lady Pemberton was already there, seated in the most visible corner, clearly intending to be seen. "Miss Halden," she said as Lyra approached, "how bold of you to summon me. I was curious enough to attend, but I'll warn you, I don't have much time for games." "This isn't a game, Lady Pemberton." Lyra sat without waiting for invitation. "I have information about the Ashcrofts, information that will change how society views them." "And why would you share this with me?" "Because you're the most influential woman in this city. When you speak, people listen." Lyra leaned forward. "And because I think you're tired of the Ashcrofts acting like they own everyone." Lady Pemberton's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest, maybe, or recognition. "What kind of information?" "The kind that proves they're not the pristine family they pretend to be. Scandals, debts, indiscretions they've buried through money and threats." Lyra pulled out a carefully prepared document. "Not everything, but enough to whet appetite. I'm not asking you to publish this. I'm asking you to remember it. And when the time comes, to mention it, casually, to the right people." Lady Pemberton read the document with the practiced eye of someone who'd traded in gossip for decades. When she looked up, her smile was sharp. "You've grown teeth, Miss Halden. When did that happen?" "When I realized being nice wasn't keeping me safe." Lady Pemberton folded the document and tucked it into her reticule. "I'll consider your request, but understand, if this information proves false, the consequences will fall on you." "I understand. Do you?" The older woman studied her. "Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a girl playing at schemes she doesn't fully comprehend. The Ashcrofts have been playing this game for generations. What makes you think you can beat them?" "Because they underestimated me." Lyra stood, smoothing her skirts. "Everyone has. That's my advantage." She left before Lady Pemberton could respond, feeling the woman's calculating gaze on her back. The break-in was scheduled for that night. Marcus had arranged everything with frightening efficiency. The housemaid, a young woman named Claire who apparently had her own grievances with the Ashcrofts, would leave the servants' entrance unlocked between 10 and 11. They'd have an hour to get in, find the documents, and get out before the night staff made their rounds. "This is genuinely insane," Regina said when Lyra told her the plan. "You're going to burglarize the Ashcroft townhouse?" "I'm going to recover stolen property. There's a difference." "Not to a magistrate, there isn't." But Regina was already moving to her wardrobe, pulling out dark clothes. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You need a lookout, and someone who can talk their way out if you get caught." Regina's expression was determined. "I'm not letting you do this alone." Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to keep her sister safe from this mess. But the truth was, she could use the help. "Fine. But if anything goes wrong, you run. Immediately. Promise me." "I promise." Regina squeezed her hand. "We're going to save him, Lyra. I know we are." At 10:15 that night, 3 figures in dark cloaks slipped through the servants' entrance of the Ashcroft townhouse. The building was quiet. Most of the staff retired for the evening. Claire met them in the kitchen, nervous but resolute. "His office is on the 2nd floor, east wing," she whispered. "But Mr. Nathaniel sometimes works late. You'll need to be quiet." Marcus led the way up the servants' stairs, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this kind of thing before. Lyra didn't ask. Some questions were better left unanswered. The hallway on the 2nd floor was dark, lit only by moonlight through tall windows. They moved in silence, Regina staying at the top of the stairs as lookout, while Lyra and Marcus approached Nathaniel's office. The door was locked. Marcus produced a set of picks. Again, Lyra didn't ask, and had it open in under a minute. The office was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive furniture, walls lined with books that probably hadn't been read, a massive desk covered in paperwork. Marcus moved to the desk while Lyra checked the cabinets. "What am I looking for?" she whispered. "Anything dated around the time of the Crown contracts. Financial records, correspondence, the original ledgers, if we're lucky." They searched in tense silence, every creak of the house making Lyra's heart jump. Minutes crawled by. She was starting to think they'd made a terrible mistake when her fingers found a false bottom in one of the desk drawers. "Marcus, He was beside her in an instant. Together they pried up the false bottom, revealing a stack of documents underneath. Lyra's breath caught. These were the originals. The real evidence showing the Ashcrofts' embezzlement, completely unaltered. Nathaniel had kept them, probably as insurance against his own family or leverage for future negotiations. "We need to go," Marcus said, gathering the papers. "Now." They were halfway to the door when they heard footsteps in the hallway. Lyra froze. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a heavy curtain just as the office door opened. Through the gap in the fabric, she could see Nathaniel enter, carrying a lamp. He moved to his desk, clearly looking for something. His face was tight with frustration. "I know she was here," he muttered to himself. "That Halden girl, she's planning something." He rifled through papers, getting more agitated. Then he noticed the drawer, the one with the false bottom now slightly ajar. His expression transformed into something ugly. "Where are they?" He spun around, scanning the room. "I know you're here. Come out!" Lyra's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might give them away. Beside her, Marcus had gone absolutely still. Nathaniel moved closer to their hiding spot. "You think you're clever? Think you can outmaneuver me?" His laugh was sharp. "You're a nobody, Lyra Halden, a girl playing at games she can't possibly win." The curtain was about to be pulled back when Regina's voice rang out from the hallway. "Mr. Ashcroft, thank goodness. I'm terribly lost." Nathaniel spun toward the door. "Miss Regina? What are you doing here?" "I was at a dinner party nearby and thought I'd take a walk, but I'm afraid I got turned around, and when I saw lights in this building..." Regina appeared in the doorway, every inch the confused, harmless socialite. "I'm so embarrassed. Could you possibly direct me back to the main road?" Lyra could hear the calculation in Nathaniel's silence. Then his voice, smoother now, predatory. "Of course. Let me escort you." Their footsteps retreated down the hallway. Lyra waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before emerging from behind the curtain, Marcus right behind her. "We need to leave before he comes back," Marcus said. They made it down the servants' stairs and out the back door without incident. Regina caught up with them 2 blocks away, breathing hard. "Did you get them?" she asked. Lyra held up the documents, her hands shaking. "We got them." "Then let's get out of here before..." "Before what?" They all froze. Vivian Ashcroft stepped out of the shadows, flanked by 2 men Lyra didn't recognize. Her smile was poisonous. "Did you really think we wouldn't be watching? That we wouldn't anticipate you trying something desperate?" She gestured to the men. "Take the documents and bring Miss Halden. My brother will want to question her personally." The men moved forward. Marcus stepped in front of Lyra, but he was 1 man against 2, and they looked like they knew how to handle themselves. This was it. They'd been caught. Everything was over. Then Regina did something completely unexpected. She screamed. Not a ladylike gasp, a full-throated, ear-splitting scream that echoed off the buildings and shattered the night silence. Lights appeared in windows. Doors opened. People emerged to see what the commotion was. "Help!" Regina shouted. "These men are attacking us! Someone fetch the authorities!" Vivian's expression transformed into fury. "Shut her up!" But it was too late. People were gathering. A constable appeared at the end of the street, moving toward the noise. "Run," Marcus said. "Now!" They ran. Behind them, Lyra could hear Vivian shouting, the constable asking questions, Regina spinning some elaborate story about being accosted. They didn't stop until they were 6 blocks away, gasping for breath in the doorway of a closed shop. "That was..." Lyra couldn't finish. Her whole body was shaking. "Brilliant," Marcus supplied. "Your sister is absolutely brilliant." Regina caught up moments later, her hair disheveled but her eyes bright with adrenaline. "Did it work?" she asked. "Did I buy you enough time?" "You saved us," Lyra said, pulling her sister into a fierce hug. "You absolute genius. You saved us." They made it back to Viral House well past midnight, exhausted and triumphant. Marcus immediately began organizing the documents, preparing to take them to the authorities first thing in the morning. "This is enough," he said, scanning the ledgers. "More than enough. This proves the Ashcrofts were embezzling and that they tried to frame the Duke. With this, we can get him released and the charges dropped." Lyra should have felt relieved, victorious, but all she felt was bone-deep exhaustion. "I need to see him," she said, "before we turn this in. I need to see Cassian." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded. I'll arrange it. First thing tomorrow. The holding cells were exactly as grim as Lyra had imagined. Gray stone, iron bars, the smell of desperation and unwashed bodies. The guard Marcus had bribed led her to a cell in the back, away from the others. Cassian sat on a narrow bench, still in his formal clothes from the day of his arrest, though they were rumpled now. He looked up when the guard unlocked the door, his expression shifting from resignation to shock. Lyra, what are you? You shouldn't be here. I know. She stepped into the cell, waiting until the guard locked them in before moving closer. But I needed to see you. He stood, and she could see the toll the last few days had taken. The shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. They're saying I could face 20 years, he said quietly. Maybe more. The evidence against me is fake. I know, because I have the real evidence. Cassian went very still. What? The original documents, the ones Nathaniel switched. Marcus, Regina, and I broke into the Ashcroft townhouse last night and stole them back. She pulled out a few of the papers Marcus had let her keep. This proves everything, your innocence, their guilt, all of it. He took the papers with shaking hands, scanning them with growing disbelief. You broke into the Ashcroft townhouse, he repeated slowly. You committed burglary. Lyra, you could have been arrested, killed, But I wasn't. She moved closer. I got the evidence. We're turning it over this morning. You'll be released. It's over. Cassian looked at her like she'd grown a second head. You're insane, completely insane. Probably. But I learned from the best. Something cracked in his expression. He pulled her into his arms so suddenly she gasped, holding her like she might disappear. Don't ever do something that reckless again, he said into her hair. I can't. If something had happened to you, nothing happened. I'm fine. We're fine. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands coming up to frame her jaw. You terrify me. You know that? Good. You deserve it. His laugh was breathless and disbelieving. Then he kissed her, desperate and grateful, and something that felt too much like love for something that was supposed to be an arrangement. When they broke apart, Lyra was crying. She hadn't meant to, but the relief and fear and sheer exhaustion of the last few days was too much. Hey, Cassian said softly, wiping her tears with his thumbs. It's okay. We're okay. I know, She took a shaking breath. I thought I'd lost you, and I realized I couldn't, that somewhere along the way this stopped being fake. His expression shifted into something vulnerable. For me too. The guard cleared his throat from outside the cell. Time's up, miss. Cassian released her reluctantly. Go, give Marcus the documents. Get me out of here so I can properly thank you for being insane on my behalf. That's the plan. She made it to the door before turning back. Cassian, when you get out, we need to talk. About what this is. About what we actually are to each other. His smile was soft and genuine. We will. I promise. By noon, the documents had been delivered to the magistrate. By 2, Cassian was released, all charges dropped pending a full investigation into the Ashcrofts. By 4, the story was spreading through the city like wildfire. And by evening, when the papers hit the streets, the headlines had shifted entirely. Duke. Varel. Cleared. Evidence reveals Ashcroft conspiracy. Embezzlement, scandal. Rocks. Noble family. How did a nobody bring down the Ashcrofts? That last one had a sketch of Lyra, not particularly flattering, but recognizable, and a quote from an unnamed source. Miss Halden proved herself more clever than anyone gave her credit for, including the people who tried to destroy her. Lyra read it in Cassian's study, where she'd been summoned along with Regina and Marcus. Cassian stood by the window, looking out at the city, his freedom still new enough to feel surreal. They'll retaliate, he said quietly. The Ashcrofts. They won't let this stand. Let them try, Lyra said. I'm not afraid anymore. He turned to face her, and his expression was complicated, pride and worry, and something that looked like wonder. No, he said. I don't suppose you are. Regina stood, smoothing her skirts. I should go. Mother's probably burning down the house wondering where I am. Thank you, Lyra said, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad I got to help. Regina kissed her cheek. You're not the invisible daughter anymore, Lyra. I hope you know that. After Regina left, Marcus made his excuses too, leaving Lyra and Cassian alone in the study. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. You promised we'd talk, Lyra said finally, about what this is. I did. Cassian moved closer but stopped just out of reach. The arrangement we made, it's done. You fulfilled your end 100 times over. You don't owe me anything. Lyra's heart sank. So that's it? We're finished? That depends. His eyes searched hers. Do you want to be? She stopped, forcing herself to be honest. No, I don't. Somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending. This became real for me. You became real. Good. He closed the distance between them. Because you became real for me too. And I don't want to go back to pretending we're something we're not. What are we? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. His smile was tentative, almost shy. If you're willing. Lyra kissed him instead of answering and felt him smile against her mouth. When they pulled apart, she said, I have one condition. What's that? No more secrets, no more keeping me in the dark to protect me. We're partners. Actually partners. Or this doesn't work. Cassian considered her with those dark, intelligent eyes. Then he nodded. Partners. I can do that. Can you? Because you're used to controlling everything, and I'm not going to be controlled. I noticed. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. You stormed into my house, broke into enemy territory, stole classified documents, and brought down one of the most powerful families in the city. Control is the last thing I'd try with you. Smart man. I have my moments. They stood there in the study, hands joined, looking at each other like they were seeing something new, something real, something that had grown from strategy and deception into something neither of them had planned for. Outside, the city carried on. The scandal was still unfolding. The Ashcrofts were still dangerous. There were battles still to fight. But for the first time since this whole thing started, Lyra felt like she was standing on solid ground. Not as someone's pawn, not as anyone's second choice, as someone who'd chosen herself, and in doing so, had found something worth fighting for. The victory lasted exactly 3 days. 3 days of Cassian being free, of papers praising Lyra's courage, of the Ashcrofts conspicuously absent from public view. 3 days of feeling like maybe, just maybe, they'd actually won. Then the Crown got involved. Lyra was having breakfast with Cassian at Viral House, something that had become routine in the aftermath of his release, when Marcus arrived with a letter bearing the royal seal. This was delivered an hour ago, he said, his face ashen. I've already read it. You're not going to like it. Cassian broke the seal and read in silence. Lyra watched his expression shift from calm to fury in the span of seconds. What is it? She asked. He handed her the letter without a word. It was formal, bureaucratic, and devastating in its simplicity. The Crown was launching a full inquiry into both the Ashcrofts and Cassian. All parties were to cease public hostilities pending investigation. Anyone found to have tampered with evidence, engaged in slander, or violated procedure would face severe consequences, including, the letter noted pointedly, young women who broke into private residences to steal documents regardless of their intentions. They're threatening you, Cassian said, his voice tight. They're saying if we don't back down, you'll be charged with burglary. Lyra's hands were steady as she set down the letter. Let them charge me. We have proof of what the Ashcrofts did. Proof we obtained illegally, which a judge could easily dismiss. Marcus sat down heavily. This is exactly what they wanted. They're using the Crown to force a stalemate. Neither side can move without destroying the other. So what do we do? Lyra asked. Cassian's jaw was tight. We negotiate. Find a compromise that... No. The word came out harder than Lyra intended. No compromises, no backing down. They tried to destroy you. They publicly humiliated me, and now they're hiding behind the Crown because they know they lost. Lyra, if you're charged with burglary, then I'll face it. But I won't pretend this didn't happen. I won't let them walk away clean. Cassian stood, pacing to the window. You don't understand what you're asking. A trial would be public, brutal. They'd tear apart every aspect of your life. Your family's debts, your failed courtship, every mistake you've ever made, it would all be on display. I know. And you're willing to risk that? Lyra met his eyes. Are you willing to risk letting them win? The question hung between them. Cassian looked at her like he was seeing someone he didn't quite recognize. Someone harder, sharper, more willing to burn it all down than accept half measures. When did you get so ruthless? He asked quietly. When I realized being safe wasn't the same as being free. The second letter arrived that afternoon, this one addressed directly to Lyra. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and laced with poison. Miss Halden, I imagine you're feeling quite proud of yourself. How clever you must think you are, playing spy and thief. But let me be clear about what happens next. The Crown's inquiry will take months. During that time, you'll be under investigation alongside my family. Your name will be dragged through every scandal sheet in the city. Your family will be examined, your mother's debts exposed, your sister's prospects ruined by association. Or you could accept Cassian's proposal, because of course he's offered to marry you now, hasn't he? So noble, so protective, but that comes with its own price. You'd spend the rest of your life knowing you trapped him, that he married you out of obligation, not choice. So here's my offer. Walk away. Publicly end your relationship with Cassian, leave the city, and I'll ensure the Crown drops any charges against you. I'll even provide funds for your family's debts. All you have to do is disappear. You were never meant to win this, Lyra. You're not one of us. You never will be. The sooner you accept that, the less painful this will be. Consider carefully. You have 48 hours to decide. VA. Lyra read the letter 3 times, each word a calculated cut. Vivian knew exactly where to strike. The threats were real, the consequences would be devastating, and the offer was almost generous in its cruelty. She found Cassian in his study, surrounded by documents and looking exhausted. We need to talk, she said. He looked up, saw her expression, and immediately stood. What happened? She handed him Vivian's letter. His face went white as he read. When he finished, he carefully set it down like it might explode. She's bluffing, he said. She has to be. Is she? Because everything she's threatening, it's all true. My family does have debts. Regina's prospects would be ruined, and you— Lyra stopped, forcing herself to say it. You did offer to marry me. I offered because I want to, not because I have to. Are you sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like obligation. She moved to the window, unable to meet his eyes. I'm a complication you never planned for. A girl you chose for convenience who turned into something messier. That's not true. Isn't it? She turned to face him. Be honest, Cassian. If the Ashcrofts hadn't forced your hand, if this whole thing hadn't exploded, would you have asked me anyway? The silence was answer enough. Lyra felt something crack in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. That's what I thought. Lyra, it's fine. I'm not angry. And she wasn't, just tired. But Vivian's right about one thing. I was never supposed to win this. I was supposed to play my part and disappear. The fact that I didn't, that I'm still here, it's making everything more complicated than it needs to be. Cassian crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. Don't do this. Don't let her manipulate you into walking away. I'm not being manipulated. I'm being realistic. Lyra put her hands over his. You're a duke. You have responsibilities, a position to maintain, a future that was planned long before I stumbled into it. And you're the woman who saved me, who fought for me when everyone else would have run, who looked at impossible odds and decided to burn the whole system down rather than accept defeat. His voice was fierce. You're not a complication, Lyra. You're the only real thing in my entire carefully constructed life. But is that enough? The question came out smaller than she intended. Is it enough to build a life on? Or are we just holding on to something because letting go feels like losing? Cassian's hands dropped. He looked at her with something like devastation. I don't know, he said finally. I don't know what we are or what we could be. All I know is the thought of you leaving. It's worse than anything the Ashcrofts could do. That's fear talking, not choice. Maybe, but it's my fear, my choice. He stepped back, giving her space. What do you want, Lyra? Forget what Vivian wants, what I want, what anyone expects. What do you actually want? It was the same question he'd asked her that first night at the ball. Then, she hadn't had an answer. Now she did. I want to matter, she said. Not because I'm attached to you, not because I brought down the Ashcrofts or survived a scandal. I want to matter on my own terms, as myself. Then do that. Cassian's voice was rough. Stay, fight, build whatever life you want. I'll support you however I can. Even if that life doesn't include you? The question hurt to ask. Hurt worse when she saw his face. Even then, he said quietly, because you deserve more than someone who can't give you a clear answer about what he wants. Lyra felt tears building but refused to let them fall. I need time. To think. Take all the time you need. She left Viral House for what she suspected might be the last time, and returned to the Halden residence to find her mother waiting like a vulture. We need to discuss your future, Eleanor said without preamble. Not now, Mother. Yes, now, before you make whatever dramatic decision you're clearly contemplating. Eleanor gestured to the drawing room. Sit. Lyra sat, too exhausted to argue. Her mother remained standing, hands clasped, expression unreadable. I've been informed about the Crown's investigation, about Vivian's offer, about all of it. I have my sources. The question is, what are you going to do? I don't know. Well, you'd better figure it out, because this affects more than just you. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Regina's engagement prospects have dried up overnight. Your father's business contacts are distancing themselves. The family's reputation is hanging by a thread, and that thread is you. I know, Mother. I know I've made everything worse. Have you? Eleanor moved to the window, her back to Lyra. Because from where I'm standing, you've accomplished something I never could. Lyra blinked. What? You made them notice you. The Duke, the Ashcrofts, the entire city. They all see you now. Really see you. Her mother's voice was strange, almost wistful. I spent my entire life trying to be noticed, playing by their rules, staying in my lane, never making waves, and I'm still just Eleanor Halden, woman with debts and disappointed ambitions. But you broke every rule I taught you and became someone they couldn't ignore. I didn't mean to. I know you didn't. That's what makes it remarkable. Eleanor turned, and her expression was softer than Lyra had ever seen it. I've been a terrible mother to you. I know that. I pushed Regina and dismissed you because I saw my own failures reflected in your face. You weren't ambitious enough, pretty enough, ruthless enough. Except you were. You just hid it better. Lyra felt something shift in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because whatever you decide to do next, stay with the Duke, accept Vivian's offer, run off and start over somewhere else. I want you to know it's your choice, not mine, not his. Yours. Eleanor's smile was sad. I took your choices from you for too long. I won't do it again. It was the closest thing to an apology her mother had ever given. Lyra stood, crossed the room, and hugged her. Eleanor stiffened in surprise, then slowly, awkwardly, hugged back. Thank you, Lyra whispered. Don't thank me yet. You still have to clean up this mess. Lyra spent that night in her room, Vivian's letter spread on her desk alongside the life she'd built these past months. The gowns Cassian had bought her, the invitations that still arrived daily, the newspaper clippings documenting her transformation from nobody to somebody. All of it felt like borrowed clothes. Beautiful, but not hers. She thought about Vivian's offer. The money would solve her family's problems. Leaving would end the investigation, protect Regina, give everyone a clean slate. It would also mean the Ashcrofts won. That all of this, the fear, the fighting, the nights spent planning impossible schemes, amounted to nothing. And Cassian. Brilliant, complicated, damaged Cassian, who'd looked at her in that cell like she was the only solid thing in his world. But was that love? Or just gratitude? Need masquerading as something deeper? She didn't know. Wasn't sure she trusted herself to know. By dawn, she'd made her decision. The Ashcroft estate was even more imposing than Lyra remembered. She'd sent word ahead, requesting a meeting with Vivian. The response had been immediate. Come at noon. Come alone. Lyra arrived precisely on time, dressed in one of her simple old dresses, not the finery Cassian had provided. This conversation required her to be herself, not anyone's creation. Vivian received her in a sitting room that screamed old money and entitlement. She looked perfect as always, but there was something brittle in her smile. Miss Halden. How prompt. She gestured to a chair. Tea? No, thank you. I'm not staying long.
Oh? Vivian's eyebrow arched. So you've made your decision? I have. Lyra remained standing. I'm refusing your offer. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I see. Vivian's smile turned sharp. So you've chosen to be destroyed. How noble. I've chosen to fight. There's a difference.
There really isn't. The outcome is the same.
Vivian stood, moving closer. You'll be investigated, charged, humiliated. Your family will suffer. The Duke will be forced to choose between his position and you, and we both know which he'll choose. Maybe. Or maybe he'll surprise you.
He won't.
I know him better than you ever will. Vivian's voice was poisonous. I was engaged to him for 2 years. I know how he thinks, what he values, where his limits are. And his limit, Lyra, is you. The moment protecting you costs him too much, he'll cut you loose. Because that's what people like us do. We survive. You're wrong about him. Am I? Then why isn't he here with you right now? Why are you facing me alone?
Because I asked him to stay away. Because this isn't his fight anymore.
Lyra stepped closer. This is between you and me. And I'm not walking away, Vivian. I'm not disappearing to make your life easier. Then you're a fool. Probably. But I'd rather be a fool who fought than a coward who ran.
Vivian's composure cracked.
You think you've won something? You haven't. Even if the crown clears you, even if Cassian marries you, you'll spend the rest of your life being the girl who trapped him. Society will never accept you. You'll always be the outsider playing dress-up. Good, Lyra said, because I never wanted to be one of you anyway. She turned to leave, got halfway to the door before Vivian's voice stopped her.
He'll break your heart, Cassian. He's incapable of loving anyone more than he loves control. It's why I left him before he could leave me. Lyra looked back. You didn't leave him. He ended it because you were using him. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you're using him too. For status, for protection, for whatever fantasy of belonging you've constructed. At least I was honest about what I wanted. You're right, Lyra said. I did use him, in the beginning. But somewhere along the way, I stopped. Can you say the same? Vivian's expression was answer enough. Lyra left the Ashcroft estate feeling lighter than she had in days. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. The Crown's investigation began in earnest the following week. Lyra was questioned for hours about the break-in, about her relationship with Cassian, about everything the Ashcrofts had claimed. She answered honestly, held nothing back, and let the truth speak for itself. The investigators were thorough and skeptical, but they were also fair. And when they compared her testimony to the evidence, the real evidence, the documents proving the Ashcrofts' guilt, the narrative started to shift. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Lyra living in limbo, seeing Cassian only in brief, supervised meetings, watching her family weather the storm of public scrutiny. Then the Crown released its findings. The Ashcrofts were guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Nathaniel and his father faced criminal charges. Vivian, while not directly implicated, was socially destroyed by association. And Lyra was cleared of all charges. The Crown acknowledged that while her methods were unorthodox, her intentions were to uncover truth and protect an innocent man. In light of the Ashcrofts' actual crimes, they were choosing not to pursue charges for the break-in. The papers exploded with the news. Half praised Lyra as a hero. The other half called her a dangerous precedent, but everyone, absolutely everyone, was talking about her. The night the findings were released, there was a knock on Lyra's door. She opened it to find Cassian standing there, holding flowers like a nervous suitor. "Hi," he said. "Hi. Can I come in?" She let him in, closing the door behind them. They stood in her small bedroom, so different from the grandeur of Virel House, and looked at each other like strangers. "I have something to say," they both started at the same time. Cassian gestured. "You first." Lyra took a breath. "I've been thinking about what you asked me, what I want, and I think I finally have an answer." "Okay. I want to open a school for girls like I was, the ones who get overlooked, dismissed, told they don't matter. I want to teach them that they do, that they can fight for themselves, build their own lives, be more than someone's daughter or wife or shadow. She looked at him. And I want to do it without your money or your name. I want it to be mine. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, genuine and proud. That's perfect, he said. That's exactly right. You're not upset? Why would I be upset? You're doing exactly what you should, building something that matters on your own terms. He stepped closer. But I do have a question. What? Does this life you're building have room for me in it?
Lyra's breath caught. That depends. Are you asking because you want to be there, or because you think you should be?
I'm asking because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you're the first person who ever looked at me and saw past the title, the power, the carefully constructed facade. You saw the person underneath, the broken, controlling, terrified person who thought protecting people meant keeping them at a distance. He took her hands. You taught me something I never thought I'd learn. What's that? That letting someone in doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave. His voice was soft. I love you, Lyra Halden. Not because you saved me or fought for me or any of the dramatic things that have happened. I love you because you're sharp and ruthless and kind and more courageous than anyone I've ever met. And if you'll have me, not as a duke, just as a man who's completely lost his heart to you, I'd like to be part of whatever life you're building. Lyra felt tears spilling over. That's the first time you've said it, that you love me. I know, I'm an idiot. Yes, you are. She laughed through the tears. But you're my idiot. If you want to be. I very much want to be. She kissed him then, and it felt different from all the other times. Not desperate or strategic or confused. Just honest. Just them. When they pulled apart, Cassian was smiling. So is that a yes? He asked. You'll let me be part of this? On one condition. Name it. You let me be an equal partner in everything. No more protecting me from hard truths or making decisions without me. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. Deal. He kissed her forehead. Partners. In everything. They sat on her small bed, hands intertwined, planning a future that looked nothing like what either of them had imagined. No grand society wedding, no merging of fortunes and families, just two people who'd found each other in the middle of a war and decided they were worth fighting for. The scandal took months to fully die down. The Ashcrofts were prosecuted, their titles stripped, their fortunes seized to pay back what they'd stolen. Nathaniel fled the country. Vivian married some minor lord and disappeared into obscurity. And Lyra started her school with money she earned herself, giving lectures on strategy and self-sufficiency that became surprisingly popular among progressive circles. Cassian helped where he could, but he let her lead. Let her build something that was entirely hers. They were married quietly, 6 months after the crown's findings. No grand ball, no society spectacle. Just a small ceremony with Regina and Marcus and a handful of people who actually mattered. Eleanor gave her away, and for the first time in Lyra's memory, looked genuinely proud. The morning after the wedding, Lyra woke in Cassian's arms. Their arms now, their bed, their life. And felt something she'd never felt before. Peace. Not the kind that came from having everything figured out. The kind that came from knowing she'd fought for what she wanted and won. Not a title, not status, not validation from people who'd spent years dismissing her. She'd won herself. You're thinking too loud, Cassian mumbled against her hair. It's early. Sorry. What are you thinking about? She considered lying, saying it was nothing, but they'd promised each other honesty. I'm thinking about how different my life is from what I thought it would be, she said. A year ago, I was the girl no one chose. Now I'm married to a duke, running a school, being talked about in papers. It's surreal. Regrets? None. You? Only that I didn't choose you sooner. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. Though I suppose that wouldn't have worked. You needed to choose yourself first. Very wise. I have my moments. They lay there in comfortable silence until the morning light grew too bright to ignore. Then they rose, dressed, and prepared to face whatever came next, because there would be more challenges, more battles, more people who thought they knew what was best, who tried to put them in boxes they'd already outgrown. But Lyra wasn't afraid anymore. She'd learned something crucial in those months of fighting and scheming and refusing to back down. Power wasn't something given. It was something taken, claimed, built from the ground up by people brave enough to decide they mattered. 2 years later, Lyra stood in the courtyard of her school, expanded now to accommodate 50 students, and watched young girls practice debate skills with the same intensity she'd once reserved for survival. One of them, a sharp-eyed 14-year-old named Anna, approached her after class. "Miss Halden, Your Grace, just Lyra is fine." "Lyra, then, I wanted to ask—" Anna hesitated. "The story about you and the Duke, about how you brought down the Ashcrofts. Is it true?" Lyra smiled. "Most of it. The papers exaggerated some parts." "Which parts?" "The part where I was fearless. I was terrified most of the time." Anna looked skeptical. "But you did it anyway." "I did it anyway, because being scared and being brave aren't opposites. They're usually the same thing." The girl thought about that, then nodded. "Thank you, that helps." She left, and Lyra watched her go, seeing echoes of her younger self in Anna's determined stride. "Still at it, I see." She turned to find Cassian leaning against the doorway, watching her with that expression that still made her heart skip. "What?" "Changing the world one terrified girl at a time. Someone has to." He crossed the courtyard, sliding an arm around her waist. "I'm proud of you, in case I haven't said it today." "You said it at breakfast." "Then I'm saying it again." He kissed her temple. "You've built something remarkable here. We've built something remarkable. I couldn't have done this without your support." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." They stood there together, watching the students, feeling the weight of what they'd survived and what they'd become. Lyra thought about that girl at the ball, the one who'd been invisible for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. That girl was gone, transformed into someone she barely recognized but deeply respected. Someone who'd looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. Someone who'd refused to be chosen and instead chose herself. And in doing that, in claiming her own worth, her own power, her own voice, she'd found something worth more than any crown or title or social approval. She'd found freedom, the kind that came from knowing exactly who you were and refusing to apologize for it. The kind that came from building a life that fit, rather than trying to fit into someone else's life. The kind that came from looking at the world's expectations and deciding they simply didn't apply to you. "What are you thinking?" Cassian asked. Lyra leaned into him, watching the sun set over her school, her students, her life. "I'm thinking I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Good answer. I thought so." They walked back to the main building together, hands intertwined, leaving shadows behind them that stretched long and proud in the evening light. And if anyone had asked Lyra Halden in that moment whether she'd trade this life, complicated, hard-won, entirely hers, for the easy path she'd once dreamed of, she would have laughed. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all: some things are only worth having if you fight for them. And the fight, as it turned out, was what made her who she was. Not a duchess. Not someone's choice. Not a girl who needed saving. Just Lyra. Standing on her own, building her own empire, writing her own story. And that, in the end, was worth more than any crown.